The wagon wheel broke 3 miles outside of Redemption, and that's when Emma Dalton knew her luck had finally run dry. She'd been pushing the mare too hard, and the animal knew it. The wheel splintered with a crack like a gunshot, and the wagon lurched sideways, throwing Emma against the seat rail hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. The mare whinnied and stamped, confused and frightened, and Emma sat there in the dust, staring at the broken wheel like it was a problem she could solve with enough willpower. It was. The sun was dropping fast, painting the desert in shades of copper and rust. Behind her, somewhere in the distance, she could still hear them, faint but unmistakable, hoofbeats, men coming. She'd been running for 3 days. Emma climbed down from the wagon, her legs shaking, and pressed her palm against the mare's neck. The horse was lathered with sweat, her sides heaving. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered. "I'm so sorry." But apologies wouldn't fix the wheel, and they wouldn't stop the men riding behind her. She looked ahead. The town of Redemption sat low in the valley, maybe 2 miles off, a cluster of weathered buildings and false front stores, smoke rising from a few chimneys. Civilization, safety, if she could reach it before dark. Emma grabbed the satchel from the wagon bed, the one she'd carried since Santa Fe, the one that held everything she had left in the world, and slung it over her shoulder. She untied the mare from the harness, her fingers clumsy with fear and exhaustion, and considered riding bareback the rest of the way. But the mare was done. Emma could see it in her eyes, in the way her legs trembled. Pushing her further would kill her. So Emma let the reins fall and started walking. The desert stretched vast and empty around her, dotted with scrub and rock and the bones of things that hadn't survived. The air smelled like dust and creosote, and the wind carried sounds from far away, the cry of a hawk, the rustle of something moving through the brush. And behind her, always behind her, the hoofbeats. She walked faster. The sun touched the mountains, and the light turned blood red. Emma's boots kicked up small clouds with every step, and her breath came short and ragged. She'd been walking for an hour when she saw the homestead. It sat off the main trail, maybe a quarter mile to the east, a low structure of adobe and rough timber, with a barn behind it and a windmill creaking slow circles in the dying light. Smoke rose from the chimney. Someone was home. Emma stopped, weighing her options. The town was still a mile and a half ahead, maybe more. The sun would be down in minutes, and once darkness fell, she'd be exposed on the open trail. Easy to track, easy to catch. But the homestead. She looked back over her shoulder. The dust cloud on the horizon was closer now, visible, maybe 15 minutes behind, maybe less. Emma made her decision and ran. She reached the homestead's gate as the last light bled from the sky. The house was small but well kept, the kind of place someone had put care into. A porch ran along the front, with a bench and a water barrel and a pair of boots left by the door. Through the window, she could see lamplight. Emma stumbled up the steps and pounded on the door with her fist, too tired and too frightened to care about propriety. "Hello, please, is anyone?" The door opened. A woman stood there, older, maybe 50, with iron gray hair pulled back and eyes that had seen enough of the world to know trouble when it knocked. She looked Emma up and down, the dusty dress, the wild eyes, the satchel clutched tight, and her expression hardened. "No," she said flatly, and started to close the door. Emma shoved her boot into the gap. "Please, I need help, there are men." "I don't care," the woman pushed harder. "Move your foot." "They're going to kill me." "Not my problem." Emma's voice cracked. "Please, I have money, I can pay you, just let me stay until." The woman stopped pushing, her eyes narrowed. "Money?" "Yes, enough, just for tonight, just until." A gunshot split the air. Both women froze. The sound came from somewhere down the trail, sharp and clear in the twilight, then another, and another, not close but not far enough. The woman's face went pale. She grabbed Emma's arm and yanked her inside, slamming the door behind them and throwing the bolt. She moved to the window and pulled the curtain aside just enough to look out, her jaw tight. "Who's following you?" she demanded. Emma leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. Bounty hunters, 4 of them, maybe 5. What did you do? I ran. From what? Emma met her eyes. From my husband. The woman stared at her for a long moment, reading the truth there. Then she let the curtain fall and turned away, crossing to the fireplace where a rifle leaned against the stones. She checked the load with practiced hands. My name's Margaret, she said, not looking at Emma. Margaret Hayes, and you just brought hell to my doorstep. I didn't mean to, I swear. The wagon broke and I couldn't make it to town and… How far behind are they? I don't know, 10 minutes, maybe less. Margaret cursed under her breath. She moved to the other window, the one facing the trail, and peered out into the gathering dark. Emma could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her knuckles whitened on the rifle stock. You got a name? Margaret asked. Emma Dalton. Well, Emma Dalton, I hope whatever you're running from is worth dying for. She turned, and her face was grim. Because those men come here, they won't just take you. They'll burn this place down to cover their tracks. Kill anyone who saw them. That's how it works out here. Emma's throat tightened. I didn't know where else to go. You should have kept running. Another gunshot, closer this time, then voices, faint but audible, calling to each other in the dark. Margaret moved back to the front window and looked out, her face unreadable. They're coming up the trail, she said quietly. 4 riders, spread out, looking for something. They're looking for me. Then get away from the door. Margaret crossed to the kitchen and pulled open a narrow door Emma hadn't noticed, a pantry or a closet. Get inside, don't make a sound, don't move. If they come in here, you stay hidden no matter what you hear, understand? Emma stared at the dark space. What are you going to do? What I have to. Margaret shoved the rifle into Emma's hands. Take this. If someone opens that door who isn't me, you shoot them. Don't hesitate. Don't ask questions. Just pull the trigger. I don't know how. You point it and you fire. It's not complicated. Margaret grabbed Emma's shoulders, her grip iron strong. Listen to me. My husband died 2 years ago. I've been alone ever since. If I let them take you, they'll know I helped. They'll come back. So either we both survive this or we both don't. You understand? Emma nodded, her hands shaking around the rifle. Good, Margaret pushed her toward the closet. Now get inside, and don't come out until I say. Emma stepped into the darkness, and Margaret closed the door, leaving her in a space barely wider than her shoulders. She could smell flour and dried herbs and old wood. Through the crack in the door, she could see a sliver of the room, the fireplace, the table, the window where lamplight flickered against the glass. She heard Margaret move across the room, heard the scrape of a chair, heard the woman settle herself, calm and steady, like she was waiting for visitors. Then hoofbeats outside. Voices. A knock at the door. Emma pressed herself against the back of the closet, clutching the rifle, and held her breath. The knock came again, harder this time, deliberate, the kind of knock that expected an answer. Ma'am, a man's voice, smooth and polite in a way that made Emma's skin crawl. We are looking for someone, a woman, about 30, dark hair, traveling alone. You seen anyone like that pass by? Through the crack in the door, Emma watched Margaret rise from her chair. She moved slowly, like she had all the time in the world, and smoothed her apron before crossing to the door. She didn't open it. It's late, Margaret called through the wood. What's your business? Like I said, ma'am, looking for someone, dangerous fugitive, wanted for theft and murder back in Santa Fe. There's a reward. Emma's breath caught. Murder. They were calling her a murderer now. Haven't seen anyone, Margaret said. I've been inside all evening, alone. Mind if we take a look around, just to be sure? I mind plenty. A pause. Emma could hear murmuring outside, multiple voices conferring. Then the same man spoke again, his tone still polite but with an edge now. Ma'am, we don't want any trouble. We're just doing our job. If you've got nothing to hide, there's no reason not to let us have a quick look. I don't let strangers into my house after dark, Margaret said flatly. That's not hiding something, That's common sense. We're not strangers, we're lawmen. You got badges. Another pause. We are operating under territorial authority. The woman we are after is dangerous, if you're harboring her. I'm not harboring anyone. Margaret's voice was steel. Now unless you got a warrant, I suggest you move along. The town's not far, try there. Emma heard boots shift on the porch. Then a different voice, rougher, younger. Jake, let's just kick it in. Old woman, S alone. What's she gonna do? Shut up, Cole. The smooth voice again, Jake. Then louder, ma'am, I'm asking nicely. Open the door. And I'm telling you nicely, no. Silence stretched thin. Emma's hands were slick with sweat on the rifle stock. She could feel her heart hammering against her ribs, loud enough she was sure they'd hear it through the door. Then Jake spoke again, quieter, more dangerous. All right, we'll do it the hard way. The door exploded inward. Margaret stumbled back as three men pushed inside. Guns, doctor. Jake was tall and lean, with a face like a snake and eyes that missed nothing. Cole was younger, maybe 25, with a cruel mouth and a tied-down pistol. The third was older, heavy-set, with a shotgun cradled in his arms. Jake scanned the room, taking in the table, the fireplace, the single lamp burning low. His gaze lingered on Margaret. You alone. I said I was. You mind if we verify that? I mind everything about this. Jake smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He gestured to Cole and the older man. Check the other rooms, she's here somewhere. Cole moved toward the back of the house. The older man headed for the bedroom. Jake stayed in the main room, watching Margaret like a cat watching a mouse. You know, he said conversationally, lying to lawmen is a crime. Harboring a fugitive is worse. You could hang for that. You could hang for breaking into a woman's home, Margaret shot back. Not if we find what we are looking for. Emma pressed herself deeper into the closet, barely breathing. Through the crack, she could see Cole returning from the back room, shaking his head. The older man emerged from the bedroom a moment later. Nothing. Jake's jaw tightened. He walked a slow circle around the room, his boots heavy on the floorboards. He stopped in front of the closet. Emma's vision went white at the edges. The rifle felt impossibly heavy in her hands. She tried to remember what Margaret had said, point and fire, but her fingers felt numb, disconnected. Jake reached for the handle. Wait, Margaret's voice cut through the tension. You want to know where she is? Jake turned. You do know. Maybe, but if I tell you, what do I get? You get to keep breathing. Margaret met his eyes. I want the reward, half of it. She's worth something to you, she's worth something to me. Jake studied her, then laughed, a cold sound. You're a pragmatic woman, Mrs. Hayes. It's Miss, and I'm a poor woman. Poor women can't afford principles. Where is she? Margaret crossed her arms. Half cash now. Tell me first. Money first. Jake stared at her for a long moment, then shrugged. He pulled a roll of bills from his coat and counted out half, slapping them onto the table. There, now talk. Margaret looked at the money, then at Jake. She passed through about 2 hours ago, on foot, heading for town, said her wagon broke down on the trail. You sure? I'm sure. She asked for water. I gave her some and sent her on her way. Didn't want trouble. Jake's eyes narrowed. If you're lying. I'm not. Check the trail. You'll find her tracks. He considered this, then gestured to Cole and the older man. Mount up. She can't have gotten far on foot. They filed out, boots thudding on the porch. Jake lingered in the doorway, looking back at Margaret. If I find out you lied, he said quietly, I'll come back, and next time I won't knock. Noted. He left, pulling the broken door closed behind him as best he could. Emma heard them mount up, heard the horses wheel, and gallop back toward the trail. The sound faded into the distance, swallowed by the night. For a long moment, the house was silent. Then Margaret crossed to the closet and pulled the door open. Emma nearly collapsed into her arms, the rifle clattering to the floor. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Breathe, Margaret said, holding her steady. It's done, they're gone. You sent them to town. I bought us time. They'll figure it out quick enough when they don't find you. An hour, maybe two. Margaret released her and moved to the broken door, pushing a chair against it. We need to leave, now. Leave? You think they won't come back when they realize I lied? We've got until dawn, maybe less. She grabbed a pack from the corner and started shoving supplies into it. Food, water, a blanket. There's a line shack up in the hills, about 5 miles north. Used to be my husband's. It's hidden, no trails leading to it. We can hole up there until things cool down. Emma stared at her. You're coming with me. Margaret stopped packing and looked at her, and for the first time, Emma saw something other than hardness in her face. Weariness, maybe, or resignation. I lied to men with guns to protect you, she said quietly. That makes us both targets now, so yes, we. Emma's throat tightened. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I had a daughter once, about your age. She married a man who hurt her, beat her. Worse, she ran just like you, made it as far as Denver before he found her. She closed her eyes. They buried her in a pauper's grave because I couldn't afford to bring her home. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. I'm sorry, Emma whispered. Don't be sorry. Margaret opened her eyes, and they were hard again, filled with something fierce and unyielding. Just live, that's all I ask. You live, and you make it mean something. Emma nodded, unable to speak. Good, Margaret tossed. Her the pack, now help me load the wagon. We're leaving before they come back. They worked in silence, moving supplies from the house to the small wagon behind the barn. The moon was rising, casting the desert in silver, and every sound made Emma flinch. A coyote's howl, the creak of the windmill, the distant cry of an owl. They were hitching the horse when they heard it. Hoofbeats coming fast, from the direction of town. Margaret's head snapped up. They're early. What do we do? We run. Margaret grabbed the reins and hauled herself onto the wagon seat. Emma scrambled up beside her, and Margaret cracked the reins hard. The horse lunged forward, and the wagon lurched into motion, wheels rattling over the rough ground. Behind them, voices shouted. A gunshot split the night. Get down, Margaret yelled, and Emma ducked as another shot whined past, close enough to feel the air move. The wagon careened across the open desert, bouncing and shaking, the horse's hooves pounding the earth. Emma clung to the seat, her heart in her throat, as more shots rang out. Margaret drove like a woman possessed, whipping the reins, urging the horse faster. The homestead fell away behind them, and the open darkness swallowed them whole. But the hoofbeats followed, relentless, and Emma knew with cold certainty that running might not be enough. The wagon hit a rut, and Emma's head cracked against the seat rail hard enough to make stars explode across her vision. She tasted blood, felt Margaret's hand clamped down on her arm to keep her from being thrown. Hold on, Margaret shouted over the thunder of hooves and wheels. Emma grabbed the seat with both hands, her knuckles white. Behind them, the riders were gaining, 4 dark shapes silhouetted against the moonlit desert, closing the distance with terrifying speed. The wagon was heavy, built for hauling supplies, not outrunning men on horseback. They weren't going to make it. Another gunshot cracked, and this time Emma heard the bullet punch into the wagon bed, splintering wood. Margaret jerked the reins left, steering toward a cluster of boulders rising from the desert floor like broken teeth. When I say jump, Margaret yelled, you jump. What? Trust me. The rocks loomed closer. Margaret drove straight at them, the horse's eyes rolling white with fear. At the last second, she hauled on the reins, turning the wagon hard. It tilted, wheels lifting on one side, and for a moment Emma thought they'd flip. Now, Margaret screamed. Emma jumped. She hit the ground hard, rolling, the impact driving the breath from her lungs. She came up in a crouch behind one of the boulders, gasping, pain lancing through her shoulder. 20 feet away, Margaret abandoned the wagon and dove behind another rock, clutching the rifle. The wagon careened on without them, the panicked horse dragging it into the darkness before the whole thing tipped and crashed in a screech of breaking wood. The riders reined in, their horses stamping and blowing. Jake dismounted first, his pistol drawn, moving toward the wreckage. Cole and the other two fanned out, covering the rocks. "Mrs. Hayes," Jake called out, his voice echoing off the stones. "That was dramatic but pointless. You've got nowhere to go." Margaret said nothing. Emma pressed herself against the boulder, trying to quiet her breathing, trying to think. The rifle was with Margaret. Emma had nothing, no weapon, no plan, no idea what to do next. "And Miss Dalton," Jake continued, his tone conversational, like they were discussing the weather. "Your husband sends his regards, says he misses you, says he's eager to have you home." Emma's blood went cold. "He's offering a considerable reward for your return," Jake went on. $500, alive, preferably, but he'll settle for proof of death if that's how it has to be. "He'll kill her," Margaret's voice rang out from behind her boulder. "You know that. You bring her back, she's dead in a week." "Not my concern." Jake moved closer to the rocks, his pistol raised. "I'm just a man doing a job. What happens after I collect my pay isn't my problem." "It should be." "Why? Because she's a woman? Because she's scared?" Jake laughed. "Half the people I bring in are scared. Doesn't make them innocent." "She ran from a man who beat her," Margaret said. "What's her crime?" "Theft. She took money that belonged to her husband. That's a crime." "It was my money," Emma called out, her voice shaking but clear. "My inheritance. He had no right to it." "Your husband says different, says you're his property and everything you have is his. Law agrees with him." Jake's silhouette moved between the rocks, hunting. "So you can come out now and make this easy, or we can do it the hard way. Your choice." Emma looked around desperately. The rocks formed a rough circle, maybe 30 feet across, with gaps between them. If she ran, they'd see her. If she stayed, they'd find her. A hand touched her shoulder, and she nearly screamed. Margaret had circled arrow. Moving silent as a ghost. She pressed a finger to her lips, then gestured toward a narrow gap between two boulders, barely wide enough to squeeze through. On the other side, darkness and open desert. "When I fire," Margaret breathed, her lips close to Emma's ear, "you run, north, toward the mountains. Don't stop, don't look back." "What about you?" "I'll hold them." "You can't." "I can and I will." Margaret's eyes were hard in the moonlight. "My daughter didn't get to run, you will." "Margaret, go." Margaret stood, stepping out from behind the boulder, the rifle raised. "Jake." He spun, and Margaret fired. The shot boomed like thunder, and Jake went down, clutching his leg. The other men opened fire, bullets ricocheting off the rocks, and Margaret ducked back, working the lever, firing again. Emma ran. She squeezed through the gap, stumbled, caught herself, and sprinted into the darkness. Behind her, the gunfire was deafening, rifle shots, pistol cracks, men shouting. She ran with her head down, her legs pumping, her lungs burning. A bullet whined past her head. "There," Cole's voice, high and excited. "She's running." Hoofbeats. Emma risked a glance back and saw him coming, bent low over his horse's neck, closing fast. She ran harder, but it wasn't enough. The ground was rough, full of holes and rocks, and her boots weren't made for this. Cole pulled alongside her, reaching down. His hand caught her hair, yanking her sideways, and she screamed, falling. She hit the ground hard, and Cole was on her in an instant, pinning her down, his weight crushing the air from her lungs. "Got her," he yelled back toward the rocks. Emma clawed at his face, her nails raking his cheek, and he backhanded her, the blow snapping her head sideways. Blood filled her mouth. "Spirited," he said, grinning. "I like that." She tried to scream, but his hand clamped over her mouth. He hauled her upright, twisting her arm behind her back until she cried out. "Let's go see what Jake wants to do with you." He dragged her back toward the rocks, the horse trailing behind. The gunfire had stopped. Emma's heart sank. They rounded the boulders, and she saw them. Jake was on his feet, limping, a bloody rag tied around his thigh. The other two men stood over Margaret, who knelt in the dirt, the rifle gone, her hands empty. Her face was bruised, blood trickling from her temple. When she saw Emma, her expression crumpled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I tried." Jake turned, and his face was a mask of cold fury. He limped toward Emma, and Cole shoved her forward. She fell to her knees beside Margaret. "You shot me," Jake said quietly. He pulled his pistol and pressed the barrel against Margaret's forehead. "That was a mistake." "No," Emma lunged forward, but Cole yanked her back. "Please, she was helping me. This isn't her fault." "Should have thought of that before you ran to her door." Jake's finger tightened on the trigger. "Wait," the older man, the one with the shotgun, stepped forward. His voice was gravel and age. "Jake, we're bounty hunters, not executioners. The old woman's not worth killing." "She shot me, Garrett." "And you'll live. Let her go. We got the girl. That's what we came for." Jake stared at Margaret for a long moment, his jaw working. Then he lowered the gun. "Fine, but she stays here. No horse, no water. Let the desert decide." He turned away, holstering the pistol, and gestured to Cole. "Tie her up. We're taking her back." Emma felt rough hands bind her wrists, felt herself being lifted onto a horse. The world spun, and through the haze of pain and fear, she saw Margaret, still kneeling, watching her. Their eyes met. And in that moment, Emma saw something she'd never seen before in another person. Someone who'd sacrificed everything and didn't regret it. "Thank you," Emma mouthed. Margaret nodded once. Then the riders wheeled their horses and rode into the night, and Margaret was left alone in the desert, beneath the cold and indifferent stars. They rode for 2 hours before Jake called a halt. They reached a dry wash, sheltered on 3 sides by crumbling walls of red stone. A trickle of water seeped from a crack in the rock, feeding a small pool that reflected the moon. Jake dismounted with a grimace, favoring his wounded leg, and the others followed. Cole dragged Emma down from the horse. Her wrists were raw from the rope, her face swollen where he'd hit her, and every part of her body ached. He shoved her against the stone wall, and she slumped there, too exhausted to fight. "We camp here," Jake said, lowering himself onto a flat rock. Garrett, the older man, built a small fire while the 4th rider, a silent, scarred man Emma had heard them call Dutch, tended the horses. Jake pulled out a flask and took a long drink, then examined his leg. The rag Garrett had tied around it was soaked through with blood. He cursed and took another drink. "You should clean that," Garrett said, not looking up from the fire. "I'm fine." "You're losing blood. Infection sets in out here. You'll be dead in 3 days." Jake glared at him but said nothing. Emma watched through half-closed eyes, trying to gather what little strength she had left. Her mind raced. They left Margaret in the desert, miles from anywhere, with no water and no horse. She'd die out there, slowly. The thought made Emma's throat tighten with guilt and rage. Cole squatted beside her, grinning that same cruel grin. Thirsty, he held out a canteen just out of reach. When she lunged for it, he yanked it back, laughing. "Beg for it." "Leave her alone," Garrett said quietly. "Why, she's gonna die anyway when we hand her over." "That doesn't mean we have to torture her." "Speak for yourself." Cole took a drink and then poured the rest of the water onto the ground, watching Emma's face. "Oops." Emma turned away, closing her eyes. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Jake's voice cut through. "Cole, shut up and get some sleep. We ride at first light." Cole muttered something but moved away, spreading his bedroll near the fire. Dutch sat apart, cleaning his rifle in silence. Garrett settled against a rock, his shotgun across his lap, his eyes watchful. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Emma drifted in and out of consciousness, her body demanding rest her mind wouldn't allow. Every time she started to slip under, she saw Margaret's face, heard her voice, "You live, and you make it mean something." Hours passed. The fire burned low. Cole and Dutch were asleep, snoring. Jake had finally passed out, the flask empty beside him. Only Garrett remained awake, sitting with his back to the stone, watching the darkness. Emma shifted slightly, testing her bonds. The rope was tight, expertly tied. She had no hope of slipping free. Don't bother, Garrett said quietly, not looking at her. I've been tying knots for 40 years. You're not getting loose. She froze, then, after a moment, are you going to kill me? Not my decision. But you'll let them take me back. That's the same thing. Garrett was silent for a long time. Then he sighed, and it was a tired sound, heavy with years. Probably. Why you seem different from them, from Jake and Cole. Different doesn't mean better. You stopped Jake from killing Margaret. I stopped him from wasting a bullet. There's a difference. He finally looked at her, his weathered face unreadable in the firelight. Don't mistake pragmatism for mercy, girl. Emma studied him. He was older than the others, maybe 60, with grey shot through his beard and deep lines carved around his eyes. He held himself like a man who'd seen too much and lived too long. Why do you do this? She asked. Do what? Hunt people for money. Garrett shrugged. It's a living, better than mining, worse than ranching. It pays. Is that really enough? Just money? You'd be surprised what people will do for money. He leaned forward, feeding a stick to the dying fire. Your husband's offering 500. That's more than most men make in 2 years out here. Enough to buy land, stock it, build a life. Hard to say no to that. Even if it means sending someone to their death. Everyone dies eventually. That's not an answer. Garrett looked at her, and for a moment something flickered in his eyes, something almost like regret. No, he said quietly, I suppose it's not. They sat in silence. The fire popped, sending sparks spiraling into the dark. Emma's throat was parched, her lips cracked, but she didn't ask for water, wouldn't give Cole another chance to humiliate her. I had a wife, Garrett said suddenly. Long time ago, she was Cheyenne, beautiful woman, smart, stronger than me in every way that mattered. He paused, staring into the flames. Her family didn't approve, neither did mine, but we loved each other, so we ran, built a cabin up in the Wind River country, had 3 good years before the fever came. Emma waited, hardly daring to breathe. She died in my arms, Garrett continued. I buried her on a hillside overlooking the valley, then I burned the cabin and left. Been wandering ever since, 30 years now, doing whatever pays, hunting, guiding, tracking this. I'm sorry, Emma whispered. Don't be, I made my choices, just like you made yours. He met her eyes. Running from your husband, that took courage. Stupid maybe, but brave. Not many women would do it. I didn't have a choice. He would have killed me eventually. Then you did the right thing. But it doesn't matter, does it? You're still going to take me back. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, moving to his saddlebags. He pulled out a canteen and a piece of dried meat, crossed to Emma, and crouched beside her. He held the canteen to her lips, and she drank, the water like salvation on her tongue. Why? She asked when he pulled it away. Because you remind me of her, my wife, that same fire in your eyes, that same refusal to break. He offered her the dried meat, and she took it, chewing slowly, and because maybe I'm tired of doing the wrong thing for money. Then help me. I can't. You can, you could let me go, right now, while the others are asleep. And then what? Jake hunts me down for betraying him. Cole puts a bullet in my back. I've ridden with these men for years. I turn on them now, I'm a dead man. Better a dead man than a coward. The words hung in the air between them. Garrett flinched like she'd struck him. He stood abruptly and turned away, his shoulders tight. Get some rest, he said, his voice rough. Dawn's coming. He returned to his spot against the rock and didn't speak again. Emma leaned her head back against the stone, exhaustion finally dragging her under. But just before sleep took her, she thought she saw Garrett watching her, his face shadowed and unreadable, and something in his expression that looked almost like resolve. Emma woke to the sound of voices arguing. The sky was still dark, but the faintest hint of gray touched the eastern horizon. She blinked, disoriented, her body stiff and aching. Near the dying fire, Jake and Garrett stood facing each other, their voices low but tense. Don't care what your conscience says, Jake was hissing. We made a deal, we finish it. The deal was to find her and bring her back, Garrett said. We found her, but I'm not delivering her to a man who'll beat her to death. That's not our problem. It is now. Jake stepped closer, his hand on his pistol. You backing out, old man? I'm saying there's other ways. We let her go, tell him we couldn't find her, split the advance he already paid us, and disappear. And lose $500. Are you out of your mind? I'm trying to save what's left of my soul. Jake laughed, sharp and ugly. Your soul? Garrett, you sold that years ago. Same as me, same as all of us. Don't pretend you're something you're not. Garrett's jaw tightened. Maybe you're right, but maybe it's not too late to buy it back. By letting her go, Jake shook his head. Cole and Dutch won't stand for it, and neither will I, so either you shut up and get back in line, or what? The camp went still. Cole was awake now, sitting up in his bedroll, his hand on his pistol. Dutch stood near the horses, his rifle half raised. The three of them stared at Garrett, and Emma saw the moment the old man realized how badly he'd miscalculated. Garrett, Jake said quietly, you're outnumbered, don't make this ugly. Garrett's hand drifted toward the shotgun leaning against the rock beside him. I'm not letting you take her back. Then you're a fool. Everything happened at once. Garrett grabbed the shotgun, Jake drew his pistol, Cole fired from the bedroll, and the shot went wild, sparking off stone. Garrett swung the shotgun up and fired both barrels, the blast deafening in the enclosed space. Jake went down, screaming. Dutch brought his rifle around, but Garrett had already dropped the shotgun and pulled his revolver. He fired twice, fast, and Dutch stumbled back, blood blooming across his chest. Cole was on his feet now, shooting, and Garrett spun, hit, dropping to one knee. He fired again, and Cole's head snapped back, his body crumpling. Then silence. Emma's ears rang. Smoke hung thick in the air, acrid and choking. She stared at the carnage, Jake writhing on the ground, his chest a ruin, Dutch sprawled by the horses, unmoving, Cole face down in the dirt. And Garrett, on his knees, blood spreading across his shirt. He turned to look at her, his face pale. Go, he rasped. Now. Emma struggled to her feet, hands still bound. You're hurt. I'm done, he coughed, and blood flecked his lips. But you're not, go. I can't just leave you. Yes, you can. He pulled a knife from his belt and threw it at her feet. Cut yourself loose and run, north, mountains. You'll find a mining camp 10-15 miles. Tell them Garrett sent you, they'll help. Emma grabbed the knife and sawed at the ropes, her hands shaking. The fibers parted, and she dropped the knife, rubbing her raw wrists. Come with me, I can. No, Garrett's voice was fading. This is how it should be, a good death, better than I deserve. He smiled just a little. My wife, she'd be proud, finally did the right thing. Garrett, go. His eyes closed, his breathing slowed. Emma stood there, frozen, tears streaming down her face. Then she ran. The sun rose as she reached the foothills, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. Her legs burned, her lungs screamed, but she didn't stop, couldn't stop. Behind her, the dry wash receded into memory, and with it, the men who'd died so she could live. She found the mining camp just before noon, a rough collection of tents and shacks clinging to the mountainside. Men stopped to stare as she stumbled in, bloody and wild-eyed, but when she gasped out Garrett's name, an older miner stepped forward. Garrett Hayes, he said, you know him. He saved me, Emma said, So he's dead, but he told me to come here. The miner exchanged glances with his companions. Garrett was a hard man but fair. If he sent you, you're welcome. He gestured to a woman at one of the tents. Martha, get this girl some water and food, and someone fetch the doc. They took her in, fed her, cleaned her wounds, gave her a place to sleep. And when she finally told them the story, all of it, from Santa Fe to the desert, they listened in grim silence. Your husband, the miner said when she finished, he'll come looking eventually. I know. Then you can't stay here, too close, too easy to find, he thought for a moment. There's a wagon train forming up in Denver, heading west to California. You get on that, change your name, start fresh. He'll never find you. I don't have money for passage. We'll take up a collection. Garrett was one of us back in the day. We owe him. He leaned forward. But you got to promise me something. You make it, you live a good life. You don't let what he did be for nothing. Emma nodded, unable to speak. 3 days later, she was on a wagon, rolling west. The mountains fell away behind her, and the endless plains stretched ahead. She wore different clothes, carried a different name, and left the old Emma Dalton buried in the desert with the men who'd hunted her. But on quiet nights, when the wagons circled and the fires burned low, she thought of Margaret, left alone beneath the stars. She thought of Garrett, bleeding out in the dirt, finally at peace. And she thought of all the people who'd sacrificed so she could have this chance. You live and you make it mean something. She would, God help her, she would. Years later, in a small town outside Sacramento, a woman named Emily Delby ran a boarding house for travelers and runaways. She asked no questions, turned no one away, and always kept a light burning in the window. People said she'd come from the East, running from something, but she never spoke of it. She just worked and smiled and helped those who needed it. But in her room, hidden in a drawer, she kept two things: a wooden cross carved by a preacher's hand and a tarnished badge that had once belonged to a man named Garrett Hayes. And on certain nights, when the wind carried the scent of sage and dust, she'd hold them both and whisper a prayer for the people who'd given everything so she could be free. She lived, she made it mean something. And in the end, that was the only redemption any of them needed.